Hey everybody, welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. I am Jeff Rubin, and today I'm joined on the Skype on my phone by Todd Strauss-Schulson, director of the new film The Final Girls. Todd, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeffrey.
There's two things I want the listeners to know about Todd. One is that I've known Todd for some time because he used to direct college humor videos. But also that I've always been a legitimate fan of your work, Todd. Not only those college humor videos, but also the short films and everything else you've done.
You've been a real bright light in my creative life. I know that when I make something, you will understand it and retweet it.
That's what I wanted to hear. But the other thing I want people to know about you is that you really know a lot about movies, and I know a lot of people that know a lot about movies. But like, if you put you and Pat Castles in a room, like we could like power an airplane based on what will come out of that. So I wanted to get you talking about movies today, and I thought let's get really granular and focus on some of our all-time favorite movie moments.
I'm ready to do it. Pat Castles and I have closed out many a winter night at bars in New York just drinking hot toddies and just bullshitting about this stuff that is meaningless. But it's real fun for us to try to outsmart each other.
So let's see how we do here. I mean, so movie moments, let's get this. I thought it'd be fun to try to be as specific as possible. When I first pitched you this idea, when I emailed you and said, let's talk about movie moments, what was the first one that came to mind? Is there like a favorite that just jumped right to mind?
No, I just kind of went through a lot of the movies that I own, or I just tried to, as I sort of like design these things I make, I really designed them. I'm trying to sort of like get into old movies and sort of watch things that are just great, innovative sort of cinematic ideas and try to take those things and beat them. I'm very attracted to movies that are like super visual and that use the form to communicate the story or the emotion. I get real bored when movies are just like photographs of like white people standing and talking. Like, that's not exciting to me.
So what's a movie you saw recently that kind of cleared that bar for you?
Oh, it's real hard, man. Recently, I'm really into like Paolo Sorrentino movies, who's this Italian filmmaker who's like famous for Il Divo or This Must Be the Place or The Great Beauty was recent, and Youth is coming out. And this guy is just really disruptive, and the movies are beautiful and full of humanity, but they're also funny and they're stylish, but it's not getting in the way, and they're just crazy. The tone of them are so crazy, but they're just full of empathy and they're just gorgeous. And he's doing just like super disruptive visual stuff. Like his establishing shots will not establish anything. They'll actually confuse you. So it's like taking the language and then like fucking with it in a way that's very exciting, So what's
a moment in one of his movies that stood out to you?
There's so many. I mean, there's a great one. Here's the way into a scene. So he'll be doing a movie about a guy whose father is dying, and the guy comes to New York City to see his dying father and find out the meaning of his father's life. And the scene is he's going to be sitting in the park deciding if he's going to go live on the father's legacy, for instance. So how would you get into the scene of a guy sitting in a park and just sort of contemplating? I mean, some people would just like shoot a shot of him on a bench in the close-up, and that would be it. But this guy starts the scene with two incredibly paced-up, fast-moving shots of people that we have not met or seen in the movie who aren't important. We see just like a businessman on a bench, and the camera like zooms by him. Then we see our lead, and the camera zooms by him. What is the camera? Where is it moving? Then we reveal it was the point of view of a guy on rollerblades, who's, again, not important to the story. And then the guy on rollerblades zooms by, and then in another moving shot, the guy on rollerblades just sort of trips and falls and crashes real hard, and the camera tracks over, and we see the guy, the protagonist of the movie, just watching all this go down. And so almost the establishing shot gives you like a slice of someone else's world, and then brings you back into our story. So the movies feel dense with humanity, and you would never do that in a regular movie. But here, it just creates a weird fabric of a tone.
So you said a regular movie. What is this movie if not a regular movie? Is it a foreign film? Is that the distinction we're making here?
I mean, a regular movie is, it's a bummer because it feels like most movies, I guess studio movies, but even indie movies, the form and the aesthetic, they're just not using the cinema in so many ways. You know what I mean? It really has become almost like an information a way to sort of download information as quickly as possible. It's a little bit like TV. Like, to me, I'm the most excited when, film or the camera or the style is like a performance medium. It's helping to give information or jokes. It's not just a capture medium. And when you watch a lot of movies now, they feel like it's just a capture medium. Even if the movies are great, Like, I love Judd Apatow movies, but, it's just a capture medium. You're just, like, propping the camera up and shooting people talking. You're pointing the camera at the lines. And that's not what your favorite movies do. You see Goodfellas, any of your favorite movies. They're not totally that. And that's what I'm most excited about in a film. All that jazz, I mean, you can tell. You can tell when there's a voice and a visual style.
So you just want the director using kind of all the movie's not just what the actors say and what the writers wrote, but it's also how the camera moves and the coloring and like all these things are used, supposed to be working together and to tell a movie, right? Am I understanding you correctly?
I mean, isn't that the language of movies? That's what a movie is. I mean, it's not just like a live concert.
No way. A movie is a 90-minute picture. It comes out in the summer. It's based on a Marvel comic book, and it ends with a stinger that sets up the next Marvel comic book. Everything else is a foreign film to me now.
I know that it's all they're made in the same corporations that are selling you hamburgers and iPads.
But I love those movies, and I want to just so people understand the distinction between what we're talking about here. Like, what is a good movie that you think people have seen, or that you think people have seen? You mentioned Goodfellas. Like, what's a good movie that does that uses like all this behind the camera stuff? That
I mean, Mad Max did it this summer. Mad Max is incredible.
So how did Mad Max do that?
Mad Max is like, this is a visionary filmmaker, the way that it looks, the way that it's moving, every shot is sped up, the way the action scenes are sort of conceived and framed. I mean, you can feel, like, here's a good way. Here's like a good litmus test, sometimes you'll hear a filmmaker in an interview, and the way that their vibe, and then you watch the movie, and you're like, oh yeah, that's that guy. It's like Scorsese sits in and gets an interview, and he's just a million miles a second, It's just like so, and he's like so smart in everything in film history. And then you watch his movies, and that's how they feel. You watch Wes Anderson get interviewed, and he's like sort of a weird, awkward, maybe autistic, but like hilarious, sweet, funny weirdo. And you watch the movies, and that's who he is.
Like. Yeah, that's perfect.
And I love when you can, you get to know the storyteller, and then you watch his stories. And it's like you're listening to Spalding great, or a great stand-up. It's just like this, a great stand-up. The delivery of the joke is almost as important as the joke. And you fall in love with the voice. You fall in love with the rhythm of the movies.
Right.
And when it's just point and shoot, you don't get the sense of a storyteller. And I'm those attracted to the storytellers.
Can you think of a moment in the new Mad Max, or I'd also accept anything from the original Mad Max trilogy, a specific moment that like really wowed you?
Oh man, the new one, what really wowed me? The guitar player with the fire is a pretty crazy idea. Using music that way, the tornado was a great thing. How simple the structure of the movie was.
Yeah, Mad Max is actually a movie full of those moments, because even just, let's take that guitar player for a second, like, one, it's just like the first appearance of him, totally awesome. But then there's also the part, maybe this is the first appearance, but maybe it's another scene where his guitar's throwing flames, and that's an awesome moment. And then the one I'm really thinking about when you bring that guy up is there's a great scene where he's kind of sleeping in his harness, and then like the war drums or whatever start sounding, and he just jumps into the guitar position, and that's such a cool moment because it's like it's fun. I assure you've never seen that before in a movie, and but also it like tells you something about the story. Like it tells you something, you get a bit of a point of view as this guy, not just as like the guitar soldier, but also like he goes to sleep sometimes. It gives you it makes him a more complete person.
I agree. I think that it's always exciting, especially when you're designing a movie. I mean, first you should design the movie. I mean, that's kind of the job of the filmmaker. But, if there's going to be a scene that feels romantic, like how do you make the music of your film feel romantic? Not the music, but like how do you make just the voice, the tone, the movement, how do you make the movie help to do what the story is doing? You know what I mean? So... You ever see those movies that feel like, like Requiem for a Dream makes you feel like you're addicted? Like it makes you, or like Black Swan makes you feel like you are literally having a panic attack.
Yeah.
I love when the movies are helping to do the story, as opposed to just photographing a thing that's happening at arm's length away from the lens. That's just not that exciting to me.
Comedy and drama, is it the same thing with this, where the role of the filmmaker is the same, or is it a different approach?
I think that probably it is. It seems to be a different approach. I mean, but I don't think it should be. I had this amazing experience. We knew each other then. I mean, when I was working with you guys, and I went to Asia for like 9 months of my life and directed a TV show in Asia, and I came back and I was like this in-house director at the Improv on Melrose, and I got to hang out with stand-ups all the time. And it was so exciting to hear stand-ups talk about like the music or the algorithms almost, the equations of a joke. And it was very clear that the delivery of the joke was almost as important as the joke. So if you have like shit jokes, but you have like an amazing presence on stage, you're going to get laughs. And if you have the smartest material and you get up on stage and you're nervous and you're slow and it's weird, it's not going to work. And so it became so clear to me that the delivery of the joke is almost as important as the material. And that your job as a filmmaker is delivering. And you can deliver with a million different techniques. So, you know, I used to, when I was a kid, I'd watch like Michael Bay movies. I'd go frame by frame through Fincher movies. And I would just try to learn what they were doing. How many frames is it all? It's 8 frames, 8 frames, 8 frames. Is that why it feels like a computer made this movie? Or Michael Bay's like 18 moving shots to get a guy to get from a door to a chair. And I just like love the language of how to use the camera and how to use the form. And so suddenly when you hear a stand-up talk about, you know, you kind of got to like, you know, just bail out at the end or add a comma there or change the word this to that, you know, or say something really mean, really happy. And you start to get the sense of the tone of those things. You can do all that stuff cinematically. And that became a very exciting sort of thing to work on. And there's not a lot of guys that do it. I mean, Wes Anderson can do it, and Edgar Wright can do it. John Landis used to be able to do it. You look at the tone of American Werewolf in London, that's like very difficult to pull that off. It's scary when it's got to be. It's funny when it's got to be. It's dreamy when it's got to be. It's a little bit heightened, but they're real people. I mean, that's what it is, but less and less and less of that.
What for you is a great cinematic comedy?
A great cinematic comedy? That's a good question. I mean, let's go through it. I mean, recently, a great cinematic comedy. I mean, the Wes Anderson movies are beautiful cinematic comedies. I thought Budapest was just like so exciting and great.
I like Budapest too, and I like most all the Wes Anderson movies. I have to look at a list real quick, but I don't know if I think of them as comedies. Like, I really like Grand Budapest Hotel, and like I probably laughed a few times. But is it a comedy? I guess it's not quite a drama. You know, it's like somewhere in between. I'm talking like comedy. Like you're gonna laugh a lot when you. What's a movie that always makes you laugh?
I mean, those movies make me crack up. Huckabees makes me crack up so hard, but I guess that's not the most sort of cinematic thing. I think like Hudsucker Proxy makes me laugh so hard, and that is an incredibly beautifully designed movie. Raising Arizona, those guys do it.
Do you have a favorite Coen Brothers moment? I have one. I'm curious for yours, though.
I mean, gosh, the end of Hudsucker Proxy where he's floating in midair and the movie tilts into sort of like poetry. I love it. I love when he first invents the hula hoop. I love that. I love at the end maybe of Barton Fink. I love when the hallway catches on fire and the last shot of that movie that kind of sort of cinches this whole very strange existential, dreadful dream logic movie together, and it's baffling, but it also sort of makes intuitive sense, and it's just so beautiful. What are yours?
The one that came to mind for me, and I feel bad saying Lebowski because I feel like it's like their populist choice, but I distinctly remember seeing Big Lebowski in theaters, which I was fairly young. I was like 15 or 16, and that was not a big movie in theaters, so it was like kind of an empty theater. And the scene where Walter spits the ear up in the air, and you get that slow motion shot of the bloody ear. I remember like a cliche movie critic falling into the aisle laughing, just like my sides hurt. Like, you know, like the thing you'd hear a cliche movie critic say, like my sides hurt from laughing. I just remember that moment so clearly. It was so funny to me.
Sound like Gene Shalit. I mean, those are sort of almost my favorite jokes in movies. You think about broadcast news and Albert Brooks and the flop sweat. I mean, that is not realistic. That is kind of a purely cinematic visual joke. You know, and I love it. Even if you think about, I know that Wolf of Wall Street is not a comedy, but like that scene where they're on Quaaludes, that set piece that goes on for 15 minutes is like probably my favorite comedic set piece of the last 6 years or something. Like,
well, there's funny people in that movie. Like, there's a lot of comedians in it. So there's some idea of comedy swirling around within the Wolf of Wall Street, right? I
think so. I mean, it is a very charming, intoxicating movie. I mean, you talk about, you know, a film where the filmmaking is doing the story, is doing the same thing as the narrative. I mean, that movie is fucking ferocious and intoxicating, and that's what the people are. And isn't it so, it just, when you walk out of that movie, you are just, I felt like revved up like I just, you know, ate Adderall or something.
Right.
I was like, oh
yeah,
my God.
Totally, yeah.
I could watch this movie 5 more times. And I did. That movie's 3 hours long, but not for one moment is that movie boring. And I loved it. I love that stuff.
So we're getting pretty, and this is not a problem, but we're not, I want to get back to this concept of moments. Moments. What else was on your list of movie moments?
You want to go current or old school? I mean, there's some deep cuts in here.
Give me something current, because I feel like your first one was an Italian director who I already forgot the name of.
What's current? Honestly, I don't know if I like movies anymore. I mean, current things that I love. What have I been watching recently? I mean, I thought that Inside Out had like a bunch of really beautiful stuff. There are some jokes.
That's a cinematic movie, yeah.
I think so, and there are some jokes in that film that are just so wonderful. And they're thrown away. They're just like dumped, and that's what makes them so funny. Yeah. And it's so sweet. I mean, standouts. I mean, I love the scene where they're sort of in the train, and what is it? Facts and opinions. I sometimes can't tell them apart.
Oh, that joke is that's such a good joke.
That's like the best joke.
It is. It's a perfect joke. It really is. I had Pat was on this podcast, and we had our annual summer movie review, as we always do, and we talked about Inside Out. And I think one thing we talked about is exactly what you're talking about here, and the way that the design of that movie is like so good at telling the story. And there's like a scene where, not to spoil the movie, I don't, maybe fast forward a minute if you really, but there's a scene where like, just when when the balls come out towards the end and they have the mixed color in them, like no one says anything, it's like not explained, but it's like a kind of a jaw-dropping moment. It's like a really big moment, and it's only because of like color, like not even like cinematography or anything, but just like the use of color throughout the movie has like set you up for this big moment. And that's sort of the resolution of the plot, is just like a blue and yellow ball emerges, but it's a huge moment.
And it's incredibly emotional. I mean, that's a great movie. Those are my favorite kind of movies, where they're using comedy and they're using imagination to sort of push an emotion. And by the end of the movie, it is incredibly moving. And for me, that's the most exciting thing. That's kind of what Final Girls is attempting in some sort of a way.
In what way?
Well, I mean, Final Girls is not really a horror spoof, as some people might think it is. Final Girls is more like Pleasantville, or it's more like Back to the Future.
Oh, I love those movies. Those are great. Sold.
Those are the best movies. And, the kids get sucked into a horror movie, of course, but it really is a story about a girl and, the loss of her mother. She gets sucked into her dead mother's most famous film. Her mom was an actress. And the end of the movie, the big finish of the movie, is an emotional payoff. But you're using the genre to kind of push that emotional agenda. And that's always very exciting to me. It makes it so much more exciting than something like Amour, which is a great movie, but holy shit, that is just, I'm not crying when I see that movie. I am just like devastated. People, right? Yes.
That's the one about old people.
It's a great movie. It's a very sober look at death and dying in a way that seems incredibly taboo to actually think about it and hold it. But I don't feel moved. I don't cry at that movie because I haven't fallen in love with the people. I haven't felt charmed by the film. The movies I cry the most in are the ones that are just like full of humanity, almost a really positive empathy, a real humanity in those movies. I mean, I know people hate Cameron Crowe now. I don't know why they do, but those movies to me are just they're cheesy, they're schmaltzy, they're earnest. I don't know why those are dirty words, but fuck it. I thought Aloha was kind of good. And certainly there are moments in that movie, even if you didn't love it, that are just so dense and rich with emotion. The end, there's a scene at the end of that movie that is just so great. And if that movie, that scene was in a Jerry Maguire, people would think it was a classic scene.
Can you tell me? I'm curious. I got to admit, I did not see Aloha. Sort of scared away by the reviews on that one. Yeah, so I'm curious, and I think it's okay if you spoil Aloha for me. Maybe people will skip ahead a minute or two if they're planning on catching up on Aloha still. What happened at the end that makes it that's so good?
There is a reuniting with. I mean, I don't want to ruin it, but
All right, fair enough.
No, I'll say. I mean, it's Bradley. I mean, it turns Bradley Cooper and Rachel McAdams. They used to be lovers, not lovers anymore. There's this. She has a child, and it's kind of unclear if the child is his or not. And does the daughter know or doesn't she know? And at the end of the movie, there's just a purely visual way to express that. Yes, it is his daughter, and yes, it is okay. And it's just beautiful. And it's done almost with no dialogue. It's purely cinematic. And it's to me, I thought, I'm a softie. I mean, I'm a real tender-hearted lunatic. But I thought it was really moving. And it's so easy for sort of snarkazoids to be like, ew, she's playing an Asian, but she looks like she's white. It's like, fuck you. You know, it's like, what's his job? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, I don't fucking care. What? How about the rest of it? So, you know, I feel the same way about Chappie. I'll take a moment and defend Chappie. Did you see Chappie?
You're not going to like this. I saw the first 10 minutes on an airplane and turned it off.
Oh, my God. That's how I felt about Tomorrowland. I was like, what is this antique? Like,
I have seen Tomorrowland. I could speak to Tomorrowland. I watched like 10 minutes of Chappie on an airplane, and I was like, you know what? I'll just read.
Oh, man. I thought Chappie was real cool. I thought Chappie felt really modern, weirdly enough. I thought the tone of that movie was so wild, and that's what people didn't like about it. But I thought it was like just a fucking punk rock short circuit with a crazy tone that like vacillated between like this really sweet thing and then this really fucking crazy, these crazy sort of who were the fucking South Africa, Diane Wood, that was nuts, and then the Hugh Jackman stuff is bad. But it's okay. It has enough good in there that movie is at least trying. I think that where I am now is that I just think that maybe ambition is my favorite quality in a movie right now.
Yes, absolutely.
They all feel a little bit lazy. So it's almost like failed ambition is a lot more exciting than successful, you know, homogenous laziness.
Yeah,
you know?
That's something Pat and I talk a lot about when he's on the show, or possibly not when he's on the show. I can't keep it straight anymore. But just the idea of like, I love a movie that's like a big swing. Like, I'm willing to forgive a lot if a movie is at least swinging for the fences, you know?
That's how I feel. So those two movies swung. Even Interstellar, that movie swung so hard. Like, did I love that movie? Am I going to buy it? Probably not. No, but I thought that was kind of an incredible cinematic experience. It's
totally,
exciting.
I agree completely. Yeah. I like Interstellar. And yeah. I said so last week on the podcast too. What's a movie? Is there a movie that made you cry that like people would not believe made you cry?
Yes, I have. First of all, they all make me cry. I cry all the time now. No. You know what I watched last week? It's actually a good question. I watched this last week, and I cried, I think, 3 times in this film. And I don't know, and it was surprising to me that I did. I've been going through sort of my collection of movies, just trying to sort of find things that are inspiring as I design my next project. And I watched Little Children because I had remembered that I loved that movie. You know that movie?
I don't know that. What is it again? Remind me.
It's that Todd Field movie, and it's Patrick Wilson and Jennifer Connelly and Kate Winslet and Jack Earl Haley was nominated for the Oscar, and it was a New Line movie from maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it's based on a book, and it's his second film, and I remember just seeing it randomly in my mid-20s, and then I bought it. I don't remember why I bought it, but I remember that it really affected me, and I rewatched it last week. And that fucking movie made me cry 3 times. And do you know why? Because they humanized a pedophile. That is very difficult to do. But Jack Earl Haley or Healy plays this, plays a monster. But the movie humanizes him. He lives with his mother. His mother passes away. The neighborhood hates him. There's one scene in particular in that movie that is just got so much. It's complicated because, it's easy to just that's a bad guy, but maybe are there actually bad guys? If you can kind of understand someone's motivation, sometimes the most horrible acts people can do is their own weird, fucked up way of, searching for some kind of peace in some disgusting, torturous way. And there's a scene where he goes on a date with a woman, and the woman is super fucked up. She has a nervous breakdown, and he's there, and he's like being kind to her, and it's very, very sweet. These 2 real fringe, sad, broken people on a date, and it just, for me at least, it filled me with. I just felt so connected to their suffering. It was beautiful, and then it cuts to she drives him home. And you cut to, he's just like, looks like a monster and he's jerking off to her. And you're like, oh, fuck, this guy is bad. And then his mother dies. And then you're like, oh my God, this poor bastard. That's the only thing holding him together. And then he cuts his penis off. Like, it doesn't sound like a fun movie to watch, but it is beautiful filmmaking. And something about the humanity and the lack of judgment almost made me just get incredibly, sad, but in a way that made me feel connected to other people, which is my favorite thing a movie can do. It's almost the antithesis of a Todd Solondz movie, where it's the same sorts of characters, but there's almost a judgment, or you know what I mean, or like a bitter judgment and irony or something about them. It's not quite as open armed, not quite so embracing of the people. So those movies kind of put me off. Like Happiness turns me off. I don't like laughing at those people. But in this film, you don't laugh at them. You cry with them, for them.
Do you often rewatch movies?
No, no, I don't. But if they're my favorites, I'll sometimes go back and I'll just re-explore them. There's a couple movies I always watch over and over because I love them so much. But then some movies I kind of like. I remember loving that movie. Let me see what that movie's all about again. And sometimes I remember that I'm right, and sometimes I remember that maybe what was I thinking?
What was one where it was what was I thinking recently?
That's a good question. What was I thinking? I don't know. What did I watch recently that I was bored by? I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I usually like them. Or what did I see recently? I watched Back to the Future 3 again, just to be like, I don't like this, right? Just to make sure. And I don't.
It's hard for me to even judge Back to the Future 2 or 3 or any of them really. It's like hard to even say if I like them or not. They just are what they are. Like they almost exist outside of cinema. They're just like this other thing entirely that I feel unable to objectively judge.
Or I think I tried Darjeeling again and was like, I don't like this movie, or I do, was I being too harsh? And I was like, well, it's kind of amazing, but I don't like it that much. It's not pleasant.
There is a movie that I am afraid to revisit, which is Chasing Amy. I grew up a pretty nerdy kid in New Jersey, so I was pretty into Kevin Smith movies, as you might imagine, and I used to love Chasing Amy, and I'm legitimately afraid to rewatch it. I'm afraid to revisit it because I think I might not when I was 14 or 15, I was like, this is it, man. This movie's everything, and I'm sort of afraid to revisit it and find out what's actually inside.
That's so funny that you say that. I also was obsessed with Mallrats and that movie and Clerks. I had those movies basically memorized. I had the screenplays and I would read them. I bought them from View Askew. I used to go to that website every day and he signed my stuff. I used to go to Red Bank just to go to that comic shop. I was heavy into that stuff also, but I'm pretty sure they do not hold up. I
watched Mallrats recently, and there are certain movies that I totally acknowledge I have no perspective on and cannot judge if they're good or not. And Mallrats and Clerks are on there. And UHF is another one. The Weird Al movie UHF. Someone asked me if it was good, and I'm like, I don't know if it's good or not. All I can tell you is that it's the best movie of all time, and that I love it.
Joe Versus the Volcano is one of those for me. People don't like that movie. That was a critically sort of panned movie. I'm not allowed to say that movie is one of my favorites. In a meeting, in Hollywood showbiz land, that's not a good one to say. But I love that movie. I love everything about it.
I do remember seeing it when I was too young. I was 8 or 9. I mean, we could look what year it came out. I'm pretty sure I saw it in theaters, and I did not like it as an 8 or 9-year-old boy. But I don't remember. I don't think I've seen it since then. Well, what is it about that movie? It seems like a very unique movie. What else is like that?
It's unique, it's beautiful, it's crazy, it's conceptual, it really is one person's voice. It's John Patrick Shanley, it's Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is a guy who works in some shit job. The tone of comedy is also so specific but hilarious but zany. He's a guy who works at a terrible job, he's really depressed. The fluorescent lights are always flickering, he's just miserable in his horrible job. And one day he's diagnosed by a doctor with a brain cloud, which is terminal, and he's going to die. And the doctor says, you don't have to just sort of go to your job every day and die like this. In fact, there's a tribe on an island in the Pacific that has a volcano, and they need to have a person jump into the volcano once a year for the gods. They need to sacrifice a person to keep the gods happy. And if you're willing to do that, that's an amazingly beautiful way to end your life. And it's all expenses paid. Go have an adventure. And so Tom Hanks does this. And then what happens is Meg Ryan plays 3 different characters in the film.
I like that.
Who gets him from his neighborhood. Then there's Meg Ryan on a boat. Then there's Meg Ryan on the island. And she plays 3 very specific characters. And it's all about, him going to this island and falling in love. And when he gets to the island, they invent a crazy tribe of like pseudo-Polynesians who only drink orange soda, and it's so crazy.
That is unlike other films. Is there like a specific moment in the movie that stands out in your mind?
There's so many. I mean, visually, it's very theatrical in a weird way. There's a lot of the movie takes place at sea, and he's at sea and the boat sinks. And he has this very expensive luggage that he's purchased. You know, they give him a lot of money, and he buys all this great luggage.
You know what's crazy is I saw this movie when I was 8 years old, and I remember that. The luggage is a plot point, right?
Yes, the boat sinks.
I can't believe I remember that, yeah.
The boat sinks, and he ties all the luggage together, and he sort of makes the luggage into a raft. And he's going crazy alone at sea, and she's kind of in a coma, or she's blacked out or something. And there's a scene where the moon rises over the horizon, and the moon is gigantic, humongous, and he's silhouetted by the moon, and he's dancing, or it's just a purely cinematic moment that is beautiful and funny and bittersweet. And to me, like, moments like that are like, it's sort of transcendent. That's the best thing a movie can be, you know? But always with humor. Always funny, you know? That's probably my standout moment in that movie. It's classic.
The worst thing I feel a movie can do is when it takes itself too seriously. And now I'm going to bring you back to Tomorrowland, which was a movie I thought kind of took itself too seriously, right?
It just felt so antique, you know. To me, I love Brad Bird movies. I love Iron Giant. I love his Mission Impossible. I think he's a genius. But for some reason,
also he worked on a little show called The Simpsons, which isn't half bad.
Now, The Simpsons, well, you know, I don't know. I like The Critic better. No,
he worked on The Simpsons early on when it wasn't as good as it is now.
I don't know what it is about. I watched that movie on a plane also. I just got immediately bored because it felt so antique. It felt antiquated. I love what it's about. I love it's about imagination, ingenuity, science, optimistic, you know, forward thinking. There used to be, you know, in the 30s and 40s, futurists, you know, movies and books and things about the future used to be really positive. World's Fair, you know, the possibilities of the future. Now everything is like a young adult dystopia. Like, it's so boring. Like, no more dystopia. So I really appreciated that this movie didn't do that. I love that.
In fact, the message of the movie is basically what you just said. You kind of sound like the bad guy at the end of the movie.
So I love the thematic stuff. I loved what it was about. But then sort of like every movement of the story, it's fucking all white people. Like, it just felt so old. And also, like, all the design stuff is like parroting stuff from the 50s and 60s. It's like 2015. Like, could we just try to, you know, push things forward instead of always looking backwards?
But even in that movie, which I agree is really not a good movie, it sounds like I might have even liked it better than you did, but it's definitely not a good movie. But there are definitely some cool parts. Most of them are almost certainly like glances of the future technology, which are very cartoony and cool. In particular, one thing I think of with that movie is like, and this is just in the background. Like, this is not a part of the plot at all. But I think when they first get there, you see there's like these suspended cubes of water and people diving between the cubes of water.
Oh my god, that was really cool.
That's the coolest thing in the world.
The guys with the jetpacks flying around like skateboarders was cool. Like, all that stuff was cool.
So with that in mind, is there a movie? What's like? And this is the one question I prepared you for. Best scene in an otherwise skippable movie.
I thought that was a really fun question. It didn't come so fast, but I just sort of, like, there, like, well, there's a couple bad ones. But they're like bad good, like, you know,
it doesn't even have to be bad, it's just skippable, you know, like, it's easy to say, like, oh, the opening montage of Goodfellas is great. Like, yeah, all of Goodfellas is great. Like, the whole movie's great.
There's a couple of you never see What Planet Are You From?
The Gary Shandling movie, right?
It's Gary Shandling and Mike Nichols. It's and Annette Bening. It's a real dream team, and it's right in the early mid '90s, maybe.
I think it's early 2000s, even.
It might be. It's really not good, but it is very, very brilliant observations, and the concept is so funny. And there's like lots of great jokes in the movie, and there's great observations in the movie. But the whole thing does not totally hold together. But it's about, it's a great idea. It's about a planet of men, but not like, like war-torn, like buff wrestlers. it's like a bunch of Gary Shandling. It's just like dopey dudes on a planet that's dying because there's no women. And so they send a man who's never met a woman to Earth to get her pregnant to sort of save his world. And it's Gary Shandling who comes down to Earth and is like desperate to impregnate a woman. And it's the dance you have to do, you know, to sort of get a girl to like you and to marry you and to have a kid. And so that's the way into 1,000 different observations about men and women. But some of the jokes are so silly. His penis, when he becomes aroused, hums like a vibrator. And they set that up pretty early in the movie. And then throughout the movie, when you're least expecting it, he's having just a conversation with a girl, or he's in the car, or he's ordering fast food or something, and you just hear the hum. And it is so fucking funny.
That is funny. That's funny to give the audience an audio cue of when the main character has a boner. That's funny.
Yes,
I like that.
But they do it really smart. Like, it's not like, you know, dopey fratty. It's like Michael Nichols and Gary Shandling. Like, it's a great big idea into a very specific bunch of, you know, observations about, you know, love and sex.
I love that answer because I was aware of that movie. I think it's sort of like one of those movies. It's like kind of a legendary Hollywood bomb or something where like people are just like stay away and no one's actually, more people like have heard of it than have actually seen it. But it is Mike Nichols and Gary Shandling and Annette Bening. So it's reassuring. It's nice to hear that it's not a total disaster. Like, surely when those people get together, like, something interesting happens.
I mean, there's great. It's bad, but it's great. It's one of those. There's a lot of movies like that. Visually, a lot of the best sort of, like, imagery comes from movies that don't totally work. Maybe because the filmmaker or the crew or whatever have tilted almost so much into the imagery. There's one called Bunraku. Have you known this movie?
No. Gunraku?
Bunraku. It is real nuts. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's Josh Hartnett is in it. Woody Harrelson's in it too. I think it's like a young Israeli filmmaker. I don't know where the money came from, but some of the imagery or some of the visual ideas are just like next level beautiful. It's very theatrical. It feels very stagey. There's a lot of, you know, light shifts. The colors are insane. It's almost like a more theatrical Dick Tracy, you know, in terms of its sort of color and tone, its palette.
Dick Tracy is an extraordinarily theatrical movie in terms of color and tone and palette, isn't it?
This is more.
Like, Dick Tracy is insanely, like, neon lit, right?
That's one of my favorites of all time. I love that movie. I think it's so artful and beautiful. This is like that on crack. Like, and it's not good, but there are some fight scenes in the movie. There are some, like, you know, 10-minute long takes. There are takes that move through a space and the space transforms around you. There's just like a lot of brilliant sort of cinematic ideas in the film, even though the story, you know, doesn't really make a tremendous amount of sense and it's not that exciting, and the acting is a little bit, you know, it's just a little bit, you know, cardboardy, wooden, you know, but the imagery, the visual is like so much to take, so much to be inspired by in that film. Another one, you want to hear one you're going to love?
Yeah, please. You
ever see Jack and Jill?
No, I've not. You are a fearless moviegoer, Todd. Bad reviews do not scare you away.
Jack and Jill, man. I don't know what to tell you. I thought that was.
I have nothing against the movie. I don't mean to be like, whoa, you liked it. Like, I don't know anything about it other than that everyone, like, literally everyone on Earth said it was terrible, except for you.
It is terrible, but Al Pacino is in that movie, and he is hilarious. I love Al Pacino. I love everything Al Pacino does. Al Pacino tickles me all the time. And in Jack and Jill, he plays like a dope who like runs a Dunkin' Donuts or something. The thing that I remember about that movie, there's a double Dutch scene that's hilarious. But the real thing, and you can YouTube it, Al Pacino has raps. He raps about donuts and coffee. He raps about a thing called a Dunkachino, I think. He does a Dunkachino rap, but it's Al Pacino like doing it like method, but like being funny. It's so fucking insane. It's like a Tim and Eric moment, but made me laugh real hard, and so I like that one.
I will definitely look that up. You know, a crazy thing about Al Pacino is, even though he's one of the best actors of all time, is in some of the best movies of all time, not only is he in Jack and Jill, but he's also in Geely. Have you ever seen Geely?
I saw it in theaters only. I don't have an opinion. It's bad, though. It's really bad, right?
It is quite terrible. But it's just amazing how Al Pacino, like, also managed to walk his way into, like, two of the worst movies ever.
I find him so watchable all the time and everything. He is just so full of vitality, even still. I got more, baby.
Yeah, keep him coming. Keep him coming.
I got one more, maybe. I don't know. But you ever see Haywire?
I did. I love Haywire. Pat really likes Haywire, too, since we keep talking about Pat.
I mean, it's so interesting because Soderbergh is like such a genius. Talk about disruptive. I mean, that guy has been disruptive his whole career. It's really exciting to watch his work. Even if you don't like it, even if they don't totally work, there's always a new... He's just innovative. I mean, it's in every way possible. It's just exciting to watch it. Haywire, I thought was okay. It wasn't my favorite action movie ever. But the big idea in that movie, you guys know, is that almost all of the action set pieces are shot with a static, wide lens, and the camera is really far away. It is literally the opposite of every other movie, where the camera is sort of like in there, being cut real fast, trying to confuse you, make you feel, the energy of the scene. Like, it's not that. It's literally just you are 25 feet away on like a 24 minutes, and the camera just doesn't move, and you watch the fight play out just like a dance. And I thought that was such an ambitious and new idea, and it was amazing to see that it works beautifully, So I love those scenes in that movie.
Have you ever seen, and I have accidentally recommended this movie several times to the same people on this podcast, but it's a good movie to recommend because it is quite good and no one has ever seen it. Ninja 2, Shadow of a Tear.
I have not seen that movie.
It's on Netflix. It's a great action movie. It's like like the best USA action movie of all time. It's like a... like sometimes you see a bad action movie and you're like, why are they doing anything except fighting at any moment? And like that is Ninja Shadow of a Tear. And it does the same thing where like it's not fancy filmmaking because it's such a low budget movie, but because the performers are so ninja like, I guess, good at whatever it is they're doing on screen. There's a lot of like really unbroken takes, or like where you get to like see that they're like really doing this, and it makes the movie feel exciting, because even though the plot's not exciting, like it's just exciting watching these human beings do this stuff.
What's your most, let me ask you one, what's your some of the most romantic scenes for you in films?
That's a good question. Here's the most cliche answer of all time, but the scene at the end of City Lights with Charlie Chaplin. That's
that.
You know what? Here's one that makes me... I'll tell you one, this is not romantic, but it's a surprising scene that always makes me choke up. Not romantic, so I'm a little bit dodging your question. But in School of Rock, which is one of... As the years go on, I come to realize is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Amazing, yeah.
The scene in School of Rock, I think I might have talked about this on the show at one point too, at the very end, which is a great fucking scene at the end of this great fucking movie, when the dad comes in and the girl who's fat, I'm describing her as fat because that is the plot of the movie, is she thinks she's heavy, right? And she like gets up on stage and sings, and her dad like didn't even know this was a thing she did, but then she gets up on stage and sings. I always get choked up at that part of that stupid movie, and I always watch that. That and That Thing You Do are like my number one channel flipping stoppers. It's like whatever is going on, I'm watching the rest of this movie.
I know the moment in School of Rock you're talking about. It is so beautiful, right? That's almost a little children thing. That's just like so human, That's just like so much empathy. We're just like hardwired for it. That's why when you watch like that scene in that movie, like something biologically in your body is just like, ugh, it just like pulls it out of you.
I'm trying to think. I don't want to completely dodge your most romantic question, and I don't feel like I've totally had a great answer yet.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, give me a minute to think about it. What's yours?
You think about it I rewatched it recently. I bought the Criterion. It's the scene in Fisher King in Grand Central. You know what I'm talking about?
I've actually never seen Fisher King, but I would like to. It's a Terry Gilliam movie, isn't it?
Yeah, go buy the Criterion. That one's
I gotta
loaded.
See that. I love Terry Gilliam.
It's wonderful. It's one of my, well, it's not the best. It's one of my favorite Terry Gilliams. It's such a great idea. It's mythic. It's beautiful. It's a romance, but it's like zany and funny. And I've never seen Manhattan shot that way. Like Terry Gilliam takes what he does in like Baron Munchausen, but does it on location in New York. He turns a real city into a dream fantasy world, and it works for the story. But there's a scene in the movie, Robin Williams is in love with Amanda Plummer, and they're both these, again, sort of fringe weirdo characters. And he's so madly in love with her, and he's following her. He's following her through Grand Central Station, and as he's walking through Grand Central Station, suddenly, and there's a million people rushing to get to the train to get home, and right as he's walking through Grand Central, all the lights shift, a disco ball starts up, beautiful sort of orchestral symphonic music begins to play, and everyone in the train station starts to waltz. All of the people that were racing to their trains are waltzing, and he is following her now through a waltz, through 500 people in Grand Central dancing. And it is this sort of dream idea that is the most, I don't know, it's just the most fucking romantic, beautiful idea to me ever. Again, that's a purely cinematic idea, but it's one of my favorite things in movies ever.
That is a good one. I am going to have trouble beating it.
Have you just been Googling this whole time?
A little bit. I came with two. One is another cliche answer, but Up. Like the first 15 minutes Up are obviously basically what all of life is about. And the other one that came to mind was, what was I going to say? Oh, PunchDrunk Love. I love that PunchDrunk Love, which is not a somewhat polarizing movie. I think there's a lot of people that don't like that movie, but for some reason,
that movie is amazing. The score of that movie in particular is
like the score and the scenes with the colors,
it's so good.
And there's a scene, and I haven't seen the movie in a while, so I can't even really remember the context, but I do remember the moment in the movie where there's just a long shot of them finally getting together and the music, and I can picture it and I can hear it and I can feel it. I can't exactly place where it is in the movie. But PunchDrunk Love, I think, is a romantic film that really spoke to me.
There's the beautiful scene where they sort of, they trot towards each other, and then as they embrace, the background just starts to move, and all these people suddenly flood in there. That's actually like a kind of a cousin to the Fisher King thing. It's a way to make the image of the movie, the story of the movie, the filmmaking of the movie, just, it just sort of inflates for a moment to give you that feeling of infatuation. It's what movies like, I don't know, 27 Dresses don't do. That's the difference. That's the difference when you talk about that stuff. You know what another one for me is probably the most romantic, or my favorite ending of any movie ever, is Before Sunset. You know that one? I
do. I love those. I got mine. Remind me when you're done. I want to get back to mine. But talk about Before Sunset for a minute, because I love that movie.
I don't know how he does it, man. I don't know how he does it, but those three are the most romantic films ever, and they make me nostalgic for an experience I never had, somehow. And I love the conversations. I got lost in the locations. But there is just something, not sentimental in a bad way, but I don't know why. I feel so, I don't know, just touched or moved or sympathetic at the end. I don't know what it is, but the end of Before Sunset in particular, they've been flirting, they've been dancing around each other the whole film. He ends up in her apartment in France. He's got a plane to catch, and she's playing Nina Simone. And she does this little cute little dance, and he's sitting on there, and it just somehow feels like love. It feels like any time you've experienced that feeling, And she goes, "You're going to miss your plane," and he doesn't even respond. And the music kind of plays, and it just cuts to black. And what's great about it is that it doesn't close the circle. So many movies kind of close the circle at the end, and so you kind of know what it is. That's a perfect little ending, and then you leave the theater, and it doesn't hold you. But when you don't close the ending quite so tightly. Did he leave? Is he there? Did he miss the plane? What is it? That feeling just drifts into you and stays in you. And you sort of walk out with that feeling. I remember seeing that movie, and I was in a group of people, and I had to leave the group. I had to be alone. I wanted to hold on to that. I just wanted to hold on to that emotion for as long as I could. I love those films, and that one in particular.
That is a great answer. Mine is way worse. I'm sorry. And you know what I realized is it was triggered when you said Before Sunset, because I saw this movie this summer. I just saw this movie for the first time around the first time I saw Before Sunset, which I think speaks to something about the magic of movies that you talking about that just immediately made me think of not only the movie but the time I first saw it, and then another movie I saw around that time. which is, I also realized as I thought about it, is not romantic, but it's just very sentimental in my head. It feels, it's a different type of romantic, I guess. And it's a foreign film, and it is the end of Cinema Paradiso, which I know you've seen. I know you've seen Cinema Paradiso, right?
The best, so beautiful, yeah.
The end of that movie, with the montage, that his friend leaves behind for him, like that scene. I remember we watched that movie in like school, so I watched it in like 5 30-minute chunks over the course of a week. Just the worst possible way to experience a movie, right? But the ending, like, still fucking got me. It got me so good. That movie's amazing.
It's so great. Yeah, that movie is amazing. That was one of the first foreign films I think I ever saw. I saw it in the theater. That was I remember that movie touched culture in some kind of a way that was so significant that my parents were like, "We're going to see that film."
Right. It's one of those.
And they took me. Yeah. That's a great one. There's All That Jazz is there's a scene in that movie. You know that movie pretty well or not really?
I don't. Earlier when you said All That Jazz, I wasn't sure if you meant more of what you were already talking about or the film All That Jazz.
No, you should watch that one too. That's one of the greatest. I rewatched that movie. I'd seen that movie in high school, but I rewatched that movie not so long ago. That's another Criterion that came out. And it is just next level. It's autobiographical. It's personal, expressionist. It's like the greatest. It's a story, again, like Final Girl. It's a bit about grief and death and mortality, but in this shell of like a musical with like sexuality and pizzazz. And it's cut in such an aggressive, it's cut in such a fascinatingly aggressive way. It came out in the late 70s. It's almost a precursor to how music videos were being cut in the early 80s. It's that forward thinking. It's really progressive in terms of the way that it's made. But, this is about a womanizer, a drug-riddled workaholic womanizer who basically gives himself a heart attack. It's Bob Fosse's sort of life story. But you also love this guy, and he's got a girlfriend, he's got a daughter, he's got an ex-wife, and there is, again, something so human about the movie. These people don't hate each other. There's no good, there's no bad. There's not that kind of, ironic judgment or detachment. There's one scene in particular in the middle of the movie that's set to Everything Old Is New Again, which is a great song. Mm-hmm. And he's come home from a long day of work. He comes to his house. It's his daughter and his girlfriend. And the two women have put together a fun, cute little dance for him. For him, he's a choreographer in the movie. And he sits down, and we see the daughter and the girlfriend, young girlfriend, do this hilarious, tender, sweet dance for him, right? Just to sort of brighten his spirits, to lift his spirits a little bit. He's exhausted. And you see just, the love in his eyes, and it's just such a nice thing. And this is a true thing in life. People do this to each other. You're sick, you're tired, you try to lift someone's spirits, make them laugh. And that's the scene, and it's done in dance without dialogue again. And it is just one of the sweetest things ever. It's one of the greatest sort of family moments, maybe in movies for me.
When you're actually making a movie, do you think about these moments? Are you able to see like, oh, this is going to be a moment in the movie, and do you think about it that way, or I don't know? How does that work?
How do you mean?
Well, just do you think about these moments? I guess you must when you're making the movie. Like do you think about like the big moments in the movie, or do you think about big scenes, or is it acts, or is it all these things at once? Like how do you break down the movie when you're making it in your mind?
That's kind of a good question. I don't know. I mean, yeah. How do you do it? I don't know. I don't really know what I do.
certainly don't. I've never made a feature film.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, that this scene is, you want people to feel this way in this scene, so what's the best way to make that happen, You know that this scene is going to be, there's a moment in Final Girls, for instance, where Angela Trimber, who we all know, who's fucking great, does kind of a striptease. She does a striptease to lure the killer. And, you hope the intention as you're sort of designing the movie is that you're going to build this character, and you're going to build the tension, and you're going to build the anticipation to a moment where when she does that striptease, it plays like a great joke, and also the sort of culmination of a lot of setup, that's invisible setup, and you want the audience to sort of applaud when it happens, It's like, oh shit, yeah, but wait, So I sometimes like to sort of feel like how it's going to be able to conduct the story, or to orchestrate the story so the crowd does what they want you to, does what you want them to do. It sort of feels like a piece of music in a weird way. It's like we're going to go real fast here, and then I'm going to go real fast so that I can get 10 minutes, and you're going to slow down. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel the sweetness. You're going to feel the nostalgia, but then I'm going to spike it with that. That came out of left field. You didn't know that was coming, but then we're going to come right back around. And it's like that's how the movies are designed, with that kind of a flow in a weird way. And then the challenge is coming up with interesting, new, more innovative or not cliched ways to actually be specific about those bigger feelings or moods,
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think in 10 years, in the future Jeff Rubin podcast, hosted by the talented progeny I have inspired, the new version of it 20, 30 years from now, they're talking about movie moments with a director and this movie comes up. Do you think you have a sense of what someone would say their favorite moments of the Final Girls is, or do you think that would surprise you?
I've seen it now with enough audiences that you kind of get a sense of what is working. I certainly know what my favorite scenes are.
Did the moments that are working, did that surprise you at all? Like from when you were in the editing room to when you saw it with an audience?
No.
No, really. That's good. I guess that means it's working as intended.
It's not like surprising, like, oh, I didn't realize that was funny. One scene there's one moment actually that I didn't realize was funny. This happens actually to me a lot in my life of like, every now and again, I would try to do something like really cool or really dramatic, and like I would show it to people and they would laugh, and I'd be like, oh, I guess I'm just good at comedy. Whoops.
I guess you figured it out anyway. I mean, it's fun listening to you, and like listeners, hear this, man. Don't you want to see a movie this guy is directing? Like everything you say about movies, I'm like, yes, definitely. That's why I'm always so excited to see you kind of put that into action and make the kind of movies that I think you and I want to see.
I mean, that was the vibe on set. I mean, the cast and the crew, we were all sort of the same age. Everyone was kind of our age, and we didn't have very much adult supervision. And I really had a tremendous amount of control over this thing. I mean, after my first movie, I wanted to do something small that would feel more like the shorts, and it was a personal story. And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of movie that I wish there were more of. It's visually bonkers all over the place. It's funny. It's charming. It's real beautiful. I mean, it's a movie about kids that get sucked into a movie, and so it sort of lends itself to putting a lot of the joy of filmmaking into the movie, which I don't really feel it so much anymore, But I love, like, remember Delicatessen? Like, that movie is in love with movies. You can tell. They're just like, what's great about movies? All the things we're going to do in every scene of this film. And that's kind of what Final Girls is in so many ways attempting. It's not Tucker and Dale versus evil. Couldn't be more different than that. It's more like the stuff we're talking about. And it was so fun to make it. And it's really nice. What's surprising is that when people see it, they feel the same way that we felt about making it, It does feel refreshing and fun and sad, but hilarious and charming and badass. I'm really selling it right now. But it's true. That's a very nice feeling to know that all the stuff that I wish was more in movies, that's not just me. There is an appetite and there is a thirst for it.
I think there is a thirst for it, and I think listeners of this podcast are among those who are thirsty for it. How does one get it?
The movie?
Yeah.
It's coming out October 9th. It's going to be in select theaters. It's also going to be, I think, like on VOD, same day. But really go see it in a theater if it's possible to see it in a theater. And because it's kind of a crowd pleaser. It's one of those movies that you loved going to see when you were younger. You get people are applauding and you scream and yell at the screen, and it's a whole thing. And it's all the feelings. Funny, scary, exciting, sad, all of it. And it's fun to go in a group. It's a good date movie for Halloween, or watch it at home, whatever. And play on your phone. And play on your phone the whole time.
You watch Tomorrowland on a phone, so on a plane. So maybe I don't know if you get to dictate where people see films. But it's funny, when you said see it in the theater, I was like, oh, of course people should see it in a theater because I'm sure it's cinematic, and as we've been talking about, of course. And there's lots of like interesting visual touches. But I didn't even think about the idea that it's going to be more fun to see it with a crowd, just like a horror movie or a comedy, or much less something that combines elements of both.
We were lucky with this movie. We went to a lot of film festivals with it. We were the opening night movie in South by Southwest. We were at Stanley Film Festival, which is a cool little festival in Colorado. We were in Toronto TIFF just a couple weeks ago. And so you sit in a room with a crowd like that, and the movie comes alive in a way that is just so fulfilling, you know? I mean, it is a bit like being a stand-up or a performer. You get to really feel the audience attuned to the movie, and they get real loud, man. I mean, they get really loud. I mean, they were in South by, it was the best. My mother, my sister, my whole family was there, and there were like 3 moments. There was 2 applause breaks, and in the middle of it, someone yelled out, "This movie's fucking rad!" and like, that's great, because when you're making the movie, you're sitting in the edit and you're so exhausted, and then you watch it for the first time and you're like, that's fucking cool. Like, I like that stuff. Like, I like the stuff that I make. I make it because that's the kind of stuff I want to see. And so when you bring it to an audience and they have the same feeling, you know, it really feels like you're making movies for people and you're attuned to an audience. And it's just nice to feel a crowd erupt like that. You know, that's the kind of movie it is.
Awesome. Well, I cannot wait to be a part of one of the erupting crowds. We are recording this before it is out. By the time people are hearing this, I will have seen it. I'm sure I will have enjoyed it. I cannot wait to go see it. Todd, thanks so much for stopping by talking about movies tonight.
Thanks, Jeff. Love you. Love your brain.
Okay, you just finished listening to another episode of the Jeff Rubin Show. Since recording that conversation with Todd, I have actually seen the movie. I've seen The Final Girls. It's out now. You can go see it. And it's really great. Definitely go check it out. It's so funny. It's really great. I think it really does all those things Todd said he was trying to do. So, confirmed, Final Girls is good, and you should check it out. Next episode of the Jeff Rubin Show, we are going to be talking to an old friend of mine, Matt Little, who very recently took the internet by storm when he filmed a video of a rat with a pizza slice. That's right, we are going to be talking to the creator of Pizza Rat. And not only that, I think... Oh boy, I'm going to say I'm going to do it now, so I really have to do it and hope it comes out. But I think I am going to videotape that podcast. Matt's coming over, and I'll record the conversation, so not only will be able to listen to it, but I don't know, you could theoretically watch us have the conversation. Maybe one of you weirdos is into that. I don't know. Look, we're going to try it, and it's going to be on youtube.com/Jeff Rubin. And of course, if you go to jeffrubin.com, you'll find this podcast and links to all of my various social media outlets and the entire Jeff Rubin transmedia experience. I like to call it JRJR360, and you can only go JRJR360 when you go to jeffrubin.com. Let's stop talking now. That's probably enough. That's probably good for today. Thank you so much for listening. Go check out The Final Girls, and see you soon. Bye.